All right, how you guys doing today? Hopping into part 4. I say how you guys doing today. Like for me, it's not the same 4 days. Or my bad. The 4 days you're watching this on is not the same day for me. Literally in sequential order for the past like hour I've been recording or something. Anyway, but we're hopping into part 4. First things first, just want to make sure y'all like that video. Hit a little exit full screen, scroll just a little bit, like the video, and then full screen it back up. You feel me? So we're back at it. Bob Harmon with his dinosaur that he just found in a rock carcass sticking out in rock wall in Montana. Shout out Montana. Anyway, so they give him the lady ostrich, and they see that the medullary bones from the ostrich and emu's side are near identical. Let me look up the pronunciation for this. Let me just make sure.
Medullary.
Medullary. Not medullary. Medullary. Anyway, so they're testing B-Rex for the bone fragments further. Schweitzer talks to the lab technician Jennifer Whitmare. What's up, Jennifer? Put it in weak acid, which dissolves the bone, including fossilized bone, but not the soft tissues. So one night, they're in the lab. They've got a fossil chip that's been in the acid for 3 days. Under a microscope, takes a picture. The chip was curved, couldn't get it in focus. Used forceps to flatten it. My forceps kind of sunk into it. Little indentation. It curled back up. And I was like, stop it. Finally, through her irritation, she realized what she had. Fragment of dinosaur soft tissue left behind when the mineral bone around it dissolved. Suddenly, Schweitzer and Whitmire were dealing with something no one else had ever seen. So, weak acid, dissolves bone, and fossilized bone. Actually, it makes sense. I was going to say, why had nobody ever did this before? It low-key makes sense because, like, dinosaur bones are pretty cool and, like, you want to show those off. So, it makes sense why nobody would do this. And I'm not even being sarcastic here. It makes sense why nobody would do this. Why did they do this? I guess they just had a bone fragment and wanted to. Anyway, so nobody had ever seen this. Whitmire said it was like Christmas every day for a couple weeks. Shout out Christmas. Because we know Mary's the biggest complete Christian there is. Jeremiah 29:11 sitting on her desk right there. Anyway, Whitmire now takes out a dish with 6 compartments, each holding its own little brown dab of tissue, and clear liquid puts it under the microscopic lens. Inside each specimen is a fine network of almost clear branching vessels. A fine network of almost clear branching vessels, the tissue of a female Tyrannosaurus rex that strode through the forest 68 million years ago, preparing to lay eggs. Close up, the vessels from that T-Rex and her ostrich cousins look remarkably alike. Inside the dinosaur vessels are things that Schweitzer diplomatically calls round microstructures. In the journal article, and out of abundance of scientific caution, they are red and round, and other scientists expect that they are red blood cells. Of course, everyone wants to know is whether DNA may be lurking in that tissue. Whitmire, from much experience, press since the discovery, calls this an awful question. It's paving the way to a real-life version of Jurassic Park, where dinosaurs are regenerated from DNA and preserved in amber. But DNA carries the genetic script for an animal. It's very fragile. It's also ridiculously hard to study because it's so easily contaminated with other biological materials such as microbes or skin cells while buried or after being dug up. So they're testing this for proteins, which is harder and distinguished from contaminants, and looking for collagen, elastin, hemoglobin. Collagen makes up the bone scaffolding. Elastin is wrapped around blood vessels. Hemoglobin carries oxygen in the red blood cells, and blah 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 blah. Important to see that they can study the protein sequences to learn how they evolved. So they're using chicken collagen, cow elastin, ostrich hemoglobin, and in October 2025, they found real dinosaur proteins in the specimens. So further discoveries in the past year have shown the discovery of soft tissue in B-Rex, shout out Bob Harmon. It was not a fluke. Schweitzer and Whitmire have found probable blood vessels, bone-building cells, connective tissue in another T-Rex. Oh, there's another T-Rex. Maybe B-Rex can get some action. And a theropod from Argentina. Wow. And in a 300,000-year-old woolly mammoth fossil. Schweitzer's work is showing us we really don't understand decay. Something I thought was pretty well agreed upon in the scientific community for at least like 50, maybe 60 years. Decay, you know the thing. We test so many old things. You'd think we understand decay and like how the half-lives and all that work, right? That's literally decay. Half-lives are literally decay, but apparently we don't really understand it, right? That's crazy. There's a lot of basic stuff in nature that people just make assumptions about. You're telling me that in science, the thing we've been trusting for X amount of years, in 2006, they were just like, there's a lot of stuff we just make assumptions about. Fast forward 2025, we making the same assumptions. We built off the same assumptions, gang. So, young Earth creationists also took this as revolutionary in an entirely different way. They seized this work after she wrote an article for the popular science magazine Earth in 1997 about possible red dinosaur blood cells in her specimens. Oh, maybe this article was just posted in 2006. No, because they gave the ostrich bones in 2004. She was posting in 19 about red blood cells and dinosaurs in 1997. Whatever. Anyway, they said that it was powerful testimony against the whole idea of dinosaurs living millions of years ago, but the volumes for the Bible's account of recent creation. And as a complete Christian, this drives Schweitzer crazy. Geologists have established that the Hell Creek Formation where B-Rex, shout out Bob Harmon, was found is 68 million years old, and so are the bones. She's horrified that some Christians accuse her of hiding the true meaning of her data. They treat you really bad. They twist your words and manipulate your data. For her, science and religion represent two different ways of looking at the world. Invoking the hand of God to explain natural phenomena breaks the rules of science. After all, she says, what God asks is faith, not evidence. So, if we're going to have faith that he did create the world the way he created the world, we have faith in that. This is just me as a Christian speaking. If we have faith that he created the world in the way that he created it, your evidence has to be fake. If you really believe that he did what he did in the time that he did it, your evidence is fake. You have to look. This when I tell people that science is an indoctrination technique. Modern people or normal people can't understand what's in a research article. We can't go and duplicate this stuff. We can't do nothing. But the people that choose to spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars getting to the point where they can study this stuff, they already believe it. Nobody's doing all that stuff if they don't believe it, right? They don't believe in the dinosaurs and millions of years and evolution and all that. They're not going to get into the space to study that. Which is crazy. This statement is just crazy. See, this drives me crazy. Schweitzer, I don't care what drives you crazy. This drives me crazy. How are you gonna put God in science? Breaking the rules of science, you're breaking the rules of God, bro, by invoking the rules of science. Like, science and religion represent two different ways of looking at the world. Yes, but no, gang. What are we talking about? If you have all the evidence and proof positive that God exists, you don't need faith. And that's the point. We don't have the evidence. People just keep lying about the evidence that they do have, like what Schweitzer found, to where we need faith because the world is believing all this evidence when it's really just not there. I think he designed it so that we'd never be able to prove his existence, and I think that's cool. I full-heartedly agree. We can't prove it. But I can tell you, you ain't proven that he's not here, but that's what you're trying to do when you talk about stuff like this. By definition, there's a lot of scientists that don't know because science is to explore the unknown, but being clear, science haven't explained everything. Schweitzer leaves room for other explanations. I think we're always wise to leave certain doors open. And now she's collaborating with NASA scientists for evidence of possible past life on Mars, Saturn's moon, Titan, and other heavenly bodies. Wow. So when I read this article, writing my paper about my creationist theories, my thoughts was this lady is convinced she's a Christian, doesn't believe in the creation story, which Jesus did. She doesn't believe in the creation story. Finds evidence that the earth would be younger than we think because it goes against everything we know about science. Red blood cells don't preserve. We don't understand decay. And then still says, nah, I'm a Christian. I hate when creationists take this and make it what it's not because I think that you can't put God and science together because the rules of science, God breaks the rules of science. God was around before the rules of science, lady. What are we talking about? Anyway, that was the beautiful part of that. So back to the dinosaurs, right? We could see, ooh, these things are young. So I had a long conversation with ChatGPT, mostly because I don't really use it for anything academic. It's just mostly like recipes that I use it for, but I wanted to know in more depth about some things. So I asked it, does modern science think the asteroids impact killed the dinosaurs or whatever, right? If you want, I can break down how it did it. I said, yes, please. And there's all these different things. So I say, how did the mammals survive in burrows if there was acid rain? And I didn't mean if they were underground, how did the rain not hit them? Because obviously they're underground, the rain's not hitting them. But I meant like all the other effects besides the acid rain too. Like how did the mammals survive in burrows? And my thinking was like, wait, then what are these things? So acid rain wasn't everywhere. Burrows gave this. Timing of exposure, they ate seeds in the ground. How long did the impact winter last? It lasted a very long time. Around 10 years. Around 10 years. How did mammals survive with no sun and dead plants? So microhabitats, diet flexibility. So they're eating dead plants. They're eating mushrooms, which are living off the dead plants. They got seeds that are buried in the ground. They're eating other things. They don't have a lot of energy needs. They may have hibernated. Short reproduction cycles. They just keep popping out babies. And changes in diets. So which mammals survive? Just small stuff, right? And it says small stuff. So I'm like, So what would have been the biggest sized mammal that would have survived, right? Based on current fossil evidence, the largest mammals that survived the impact were probably no bigger than a badger or a raccoon. 22 pounds at most. Right? Why size mattered. Food scarcity, shelter, reproduction rate. So things surviving could have been up to 22 pounds. I don't think if there was acid rain, these things are burrowing underground and they're eating enough to actually live. But, you know, I guess that's neither here nor there. So I said, how did humans come out of that? And it took my question along the wrong way, I think. So I said, the main side effect of the impact of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was what? Sunlight, photosynthesis, and food chain collapse. Which birds would have survived? Only some birds, right? Only some birds. Small groups of ground-dwelling beaked birds, right? Small size, ground-living, seed-eating, burrowing or hiding behavior, similar to the modern quail or tinamou. What didn't survive? Tree-leaving, toothed birds, all that jazz. What evolved into elephants? And with that, right, we can see that the earliest proboscideans were small semi-aquatic mammals called the Moitherium, about the size of a pig, living 35 millions of years ago, and all that jazz. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do we got surviving? Apparently, the biggest thing we got surviving is the size of a badger or a small raccoon, 22 pounds. And we have this thing. This thing survives, which lived through acid rain, had to burrow, had to eat seeds, dead plants, mushrooms, and all this stuff, right? 22 pounds, surviving acid rain, almost a nuclear winter, no sun, and all this type of jazz. It survived all that. 22 pounds. This is the biggest mammal that survived. That thing, 22 pounds, evolved into not only elephants, but also mammoths. Apparently mammoths, humans, mammoths, whales, any mammal, for real, which is just crazy. So the point of this video, this I think is the last video. Oh yeah, this is the last video of the series for this one, right? So I have to believe a little 22 pounder evolved into humans, which can now get up to like 200 pounds on average. 22 pounder evolved into things that are like, you know, that's fine. The last living dinosaurs, they evolved into like ostriches and emus. Maybe that's fine. Maybe. Sure. You know what? That's a lot more credible than 22-pound little raccoon evolving into a human, or a 22-pound raccoon evolving into an elephant, or a mammoth, or even a whale, in 66 million years. Cause yeah, that makes sense, right? And all of this is what the average person walking around any country just believes. So they found a brontosaurus, thought it was special, realized it was an apatosaurus, which was already named, and they got rid of the brontosaurus, and then they just found enough differences to name it its own thing. So like it was real, then they realized, oh wait, this one's not real, this is one of these. And then they were like, oh look, differences, all right, we can make it its own thing, I guess. Come on. So all of that to say, right, I don't believe that the asteroid and everything killed the dinosaurs. I will be honest, I have no explanation for the Chicxulub crater. I have no explanation for that. What I do have is, I do believe the flood, and that's how we don't understand decay or the red blood cells. The KT boundary can be explained by Psalm, that God put a boundary in the earth, right? Not a bow in the sky, but a bound in the earth, and not talking about the sand, because water goes over that all the time. That was apparently an illustration used by Jeremiah to get his point across, but that he put a bound, in that the water should not pass back over, right? Pass back over. And as a young creationist, this flood and the fossilization rapidly of all dinosaurs would also cover any old fossil or anything like that. I think the fossil record is just everything else that died, and they were all like individual animals that God had created. And because two of every kind was taken, you don't need a bunch of different dinosaurs. You only need to take one. Maybe that's the iguana or the iguanodon, whatever the word, right? Or he didn't want to take all the different mammals. He didn't want to take Pachycetus. He took Pachycetus's brother. So all the other cetuses, they got left behind and didn't turn into freaking whales, because I can't believe people think a dog-shaped thing turned into a whale. Same way that they may say, I don't know how you believe that God flooded the earth and hoop de bloop de blah. But look at that. We got Bob Harmon looking at a rock structure while he's eating his lunch. He's eating a bologna sandwich. Bob Harmon looks up at a rock structure and says, "That's a piece of bone sticking out of that." Then they break it. They try to put it in a helicopter, break it in half, and then they say, "Oh, there's red blood cells and tissues, and this thing is 68 million years old, and it still has red blood cells and soft tissues." Be so for real. Be so for real. I refuse to think that way personally, but let me know what y'all think. I'm not saying my mind could be swayed, but I'd like to hear what you think after you've seen all my evidence laid out, at least on this topic for dinosaurs specifically. Let me know what you think. I'll respond to the comments. All right, that's going to be the end of the video. Hope you guys have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.